Commander Throx stood on the bridge of the Coalition flagship, watching his entire military career crumble faster than a stale protein wafer. The holographic display showed red dots retreating from the Zephyrian advance at what could only be described as comically pathetic speed. "Sir," squeaked his aide Pip, nervously munching on his third anxiety snack of the hour, "the Altarians have just declared strategic repositioning." "Strategic repositioning?" Throx's 4 eyes bulged in disbelief. "They're running away so fast they left scorch marks in space." The Galactic Defense Coalition had been the pride of 17 different species for over 3 centuries. They'd handled border disputes, trade wars, and even that awkward incident with the sentient gas clouds who kept complaining about atmospheric pollution. But the Zephyrian Empire, that was a whole different level of nightmare fuel. "What about the Centaurians?" Throx asked, though he already knew the answer from Pip's expression. "They've declared temporary tactical withdrawal to reevaluate their strategic options." Pip's voice got smaller with each word. "The Rigelians called it a cosmic sabbatical. The vegans claimed they suddenly remembered they left their ovens on." Throx slumped into his command chair, which immediately began playing soothing meditation music. Even his furniture knew this was a disaster. The Zephyrians weren't just winning battles, they were winning them without firing a shot. Their psychic fear projectors could turn the bravest warriors into quivering masses of terror within minutes. "Sir, incoming transmission from the Zephyrian fleet," announced his communications officer. The main screen flickered to life, showing General Vexthul, whose face looked like someone had taken nightmare fuel and given it anger management issues. "Coalition forces, you have 48 standard hours to evacuate this sector before we claim it as Zephyrian territory. Resistance is not just futile, it's laughably pathetic." The transmission cut off, leaving Throx staring at his own reflection in the dark screen. 48 hours. That was barely enough time to compose a proper surrender speech, let alone mount any kind of defense. "Sir," Pip whispered, "maybe we should consider following standard protocol and, run away screaming?" Throxax was about to agree when his tactical officer spoke up. "Commander, I'm detecting an automated distress beacon. It's broadcasting on all frequencies, asking for military assistance. Who's crazy enough to answer a distress call in this sector?" Throx muttered. "Unknown, sir." The response came from a system called Sol. "They're sending a single ship." Throx perked up slightly. Maybe some advanced civilization had finally decided to intervene. "What do we know about this Sol system?" His science officer consulted her datapad. "Very little, sir. Third-rate system, single star, inhabited by a species that calls themselves humans. They only achieved faster than light travel about 50 years ago." 50 years? Throx's hopes deflated faster than a punctured spacesuit. "That's it? They're basically children." "Actually, sir," the science officer continued, "our databases show they've been involved in several minor peacekeeping operations, mostly trading disputes and diplomatic missions." Pip stopped mid-chew. "So they're sending space mall cops to fight the most terrifying military force in the galaxy?" "Apparently so." Throxax rubbed his temples, feeling a headache forming behind all 4 eyes. "Well, at least when they get vaporized, we can say we tried everything." The bridge fell silent except for the sound of Pip's nervous eating and the distant hum of life support systems. In the view screen, stars twinkled peacefully, but completely unaware that the galaxy's greatest military alliance had just been reduced to hoping that a species of barely evolved primates might somehow save them all. "Sir," the communications officer said quietly, "should I respond to the humans?" Throxax looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. Some of the finest military minds in the galaxy, all staring at him with the same expression of desperate hope mixed with complete bewilderment. "Send them our coordinates," he said finally, "and warn them about the Zephyrians. If they're coming here to die, they at least deserve to know what's about to kill them." Captain Jake Morrison was having what he considered a perfectly normal Tuesday morning aboard the Earth vessel Resilience when the universe decided to get weird on him. He was nursing his third cup of coffee and reading reports about a minor space station dispute when his communications officer announced incoming priority transmissions. Multiple alien species requesting immediate military assistance, reported Lieutenant Torres, trying to keep the bewilderment out of her voice. They're very excited about something. Jake set down his coffee mug, which bore the words "Galaxy's okayest captain" in faded letters. Define excited. Well, sir, one of them is speaking in what sounds like 17 different languages at once. Another one keeps making high-pitched squealing noises, and the third one appears to be crying. Dr. Elena Vasquez looked up from her xenobiology console, raising an eyebrow. Either they're having the worst diplomatic crisis in galactic history, or someone's throwing a really weird party. Let's hope it's the party, Jake muttered. Put the most coherent one through. The main screen flickered to life, showing Commander Throx in what appeared to be various states of emotional breakdown. His 4 eyes were darting around frantically, and his uniform looked like he'd been sleeping in it for a week. Human vessel, thank the cosmic forces you responded. Throx exclaimed, his voice cracking with relief. We desperately need your assistance against the Zephyrian Empire. They're advancing on our position with weapons of unimaginable terror. Jake exchanged glances with his crew. In his 15 years of military service, he'd handled everything from space pirates to diplomatic incidents involving sentient crystals. This seemed like just another Tuesday. Okay, slow down there, Commander Jake said in his most diplomatic voice. What exactly are we dealing with here? Pirates? Smugglers? Someone having a border dispute? Throx's eyes grew even wider, if that was possible. Border dispute? Captain, the Zephyrians have conquered 14 systems in the past month. They possess psychic weapons that can induce paralyzing fear in their enemies. The entire Galactic Defense Coalition has been forced to retreat. Tech specialist Ravi Singh looked up from his console with genuine interest. Psychic weapons? That's actually pretty cool. How do they work? Is it some kind of neural interface or more like electromagnetic frequency manipulation? They make you want to curl up and die, Throx screamed, his composure finally snapping. Ah, said Jake, nodding sagely. So it's psychological warfare. We've dealt with that before. Elena leaned forward, her scientific curiosity overriding diplomatic protocol. Commander, when you say psychic weapons, are we talking about actual telepathic abilities or advanced technology that mimics psychic effects? Does it matter? Throx wailed. The effect is the same. Entire fleets turn tail and run at the first sign of Zephyrian ships. Jake scratched his chin thoughtfully. Well, that does sound inconvenient. What's our timeline here? 47 hours until they arrive at this sector, Throx said, his voice barely above a whisper. We're the last line of defense between them and the core worlds. 47 hours, Jake repeated, mentally calculating travel time and logistics. That's doable. We can be at your position in about 6 hours. The alien commander stared at him in disbelief. You're actually coming? To fight the Zephyrians? Well, yeah, Jake said with a shrug. That's what we do. Keep the peace, help out where we can. Standard peacekeeping protocol. Elena shot him a look. Jake, I don't think this is exactly standard peacekeeping. Elena, remember the Tau Ceti incident? We had to negotiate with those gas beings who kept threatening to implode their own star. This is probably easier. Ravi was already pulling up tactical displays. Captain, I'm reading the technical specifications they're sending us. The Zephyrian ships are actually pretty conventional. Standard energy shields, plasma weapons faster than light drives. The fear thing seems to be their main tactical advantage. See? Jake turned back to the screen. We'll figure something out. We always do. Throxax looked like he was about to have a complete nervous breakdown. Captain Morrison, I don't think you understand the gravity of the situation. These aren't ordinary opponents. They've defeated military forces that have been training for centuries. Commander, Jake said patiently, in my experience, the biggest problem with most conflicts is that people overthink them. You get so focused on what your enemy can do that you forget what you can do. But the fear weapons are a problem we'll solve when we get there, Jake interrupted. Now, do you have tactical data on their ship configurations? Fleet positions? Supply lines? As Throx began transmitting technical data, Elena pulled Jake aside. Are you absolutely sure about this? Because it sounds like we're about to go up against some kind of galactic superpower with a crew of 37 and a ship that's held together mostly by duct tape and optimism. Jake grinned. Elena, when has that ever stopped us before? Never, she admitted. That's what worries me. The Resilience dropped out of hyperspace to the sound of Don't Stop Me Now by Queen, because Jake Morrison firmly believed that if you were going to make an entrance, you might as well make it memorable. The alien fleet scattered like startled fish, apparently not expecting anyone to arrive with what sounded like a one-man rock concert. Captain, reported Torres, we're receiving approximately 47 simultaneous hail requests from the Coalition fleet. Put Commander Throx through first, Jake said, settling into his captain's chair. Then turn the music down. We don't want to give them the wrong impression. The main screen showed Throx's bridge, where every alien visible was staring at something off-camera with expressions of complete bewilderment. Captain Morrison, Throx said slowly, was that music? Classic rock, Jake confirmed. It's a human tradition. We like to arrive with style. You're playing entertainment sounds while approaching a war zone, Throxax said, his voice hollow with disbelief. Elena leaned into the conversation. Actually, Commander, studies have shown that music can have significant psychological effects on both allies and enemies. It's a form of psychological warfare. Psychological warfare, Throx repeated, suddenly perking up. Yes, you're already implementing advanced human combat tactics. Jake shot Elena a look that clearly said just go with it, then turned back to the screen. Right. So where are these Zephyrians? I'd like to get a look at what we're dealing with. They're holding position approximately 2 light hours from here, Throxax said, consulting his tactical display. Captain, I must warn you, their fear projectors have a range of several million kilometers. The moment you enter their sphere of influence, your crew will be overcome with paralyzing terror. Ravi looked up from his console with the expression of someone who'd just solved a particularly interesting puzzle. Commander, I've been analyzing the technical specifications you sent us. These fear projectors appear to operate on a specific range of brainwave frequencies. Do all your species share similar neural patterns? Well, yes, most carbon-based life forms in this sector evolved along similar lines, Throx said. Why? Because humans evolved in complete isolation, Elena said, understanding where Ravi was going with this. Our neural patterns might be different enough to provide natural resistance. Might be? Throx's voice cracked. Jake waved dismissively. There's only one way to find out. Torres, set course for the Zephyrian fleet. Best possible speed. Sir, Torres said. That's going to put us in direct confrontation with a force that outnumbers us roughly 300 to 1. I've had worse odds, Jake said cheerfully. Remember that time we had to negotiate with the Andromedan Trade Consortium? They had 12 negotiators, and we had me with a hangover. You won that negotiation, Elena pointed out. Exactly. Confidence is key. As the Resilience approached the Zephyrian fleet, Jake's crew began implementing what they generously called tactical preparations. This mostly involved Ravi connecting his tablet to the ship's defensive systems while Elena ran every biological scan she could think of on the approaching enemy vessels. Captain Elena announced, "I'm detecting massive energy signatures from the lead ships. The fear projectors are definitely active." "How are you feeling?" Jake asked his crew. "Fine," reported Torres. "A little excited, actually," said Ravi. "This is the most interesting tech I've seen in years." "Mildly annoyed that we're missing lunch," Elena added. From the communications channel, they could hear what sounded like several alien species having simultaneous panic attacks. "Captain Morrison," Throx's voice came through in a hoarse whisper, "you should be experiencing overwhelming terror by now. You're well within range of their weapons." "Nope," Jake said, checking his instruments. "Everything looks normal from here." "This is impossible," came a new voice. General Vexthol's nightmarish visage filled the screen, his expression shifting from confidence to confusion. "Human vessel, you will surrender immediately or face the full might of the Zephyrian Empire." Jake studied the alien general for a moment. "You know, you're really not as scary as everyone made you out to be. I mean, sure, you've got the whole nightmare fuel thing going on, but I've seen scarier things in Earth horror movies." "What?" Vexthol roared, his fear projectors visibly intensifying on Elena's scanners. "Yeah, we had this director named John Carpenter who could have given you some pointers," Jake continued conversationally. "Better lighting, more dramatic music, maybe some practical effects." Elena was trying very hard not to laugh. "Captain, their fear projectors are operating at maximum output. They're throwing everything they have at us. And I'm feeling a slight urge to reorganize my sock drawer," Jake said. "Is that supposed to be the terror?" Vexthol's expression was shifting through what appeared to be several stages of disbelief. You're not afraid?" "Should I be?" Jake asked. "I mean, you're certainly putting on a good show, but I've been through military training, 3 divorces, and a tax audit. This is more like a minor inconvenience." "Impossible," Vexthol screamed, and Jake could see other Zephyrian officers in the background looking equally confused. "Ravi," Jake said, "are you getting good readings on their technology?" "Oh, this is fantastic," Ravi said, his enthusiasm completely at odds with the supposedly terrifying situation. "Their fear projectors are actually quite sophisticated. I think I can reverse engineer the frequency patterns." "Excellent. Elena, any thoughts on biological weaknesses?" "Working on it," Elena said, her fingers flying over her console. "Their physiology suggests they've evolved to be apex predators, but there might be some interesting vulnerabilities." Throx's voice came through the communication system, filled with awe. "Captain Morrison, you and your crew are engaging in casual conversation while facing weapons that have brought down entire civilizations." "Well," Jake said, "when you put it that way, it does sound pretty impressive." What happened next could only be described as the most politely devastating military engagement in galactic history. The Zephyrian Empire, having built their entire military doctrine around the principle that everyone would be too terrified to fight back, suddenly found themselves facing an enemy that treated their most terrifying weapons like a mildly interesting science experiment. "Ravi," Jake said, watching as Zephyrian ships began moving into attack formation, "please tell me you figured out how to turn their fear thing against them." "Actually, Captain, I've done something better," Ravi said, his fingers dancing across his console. "I've modified our communications array to broadcast on the same frequency as their fear projectors. Instead of fear, though, I'm transmitting, well, let's call it aggressive confidence." Elena looked up from her biological scanners to define aggressive confidence. "Remember that motivational speech you gave to the crew before the Proxima Centauri trade negotiations?" Ravi asked Jake. "The one where I said we were going to negotiate so hard they'd forget what they were selling?" "That's the one. I recorded it, and I'm broadcasting it on a loop, amplified through their own fear network." Elena blinked. "So you're basically giving every Zephyrian in the fleet a pep talk about human determination?" "More or less." Jake grinned. "I love it. Fire when ready. The result was spectacular. The Zephyrian fleet, which had been approaching in perfect formation, but suddenly began wobbling as their own fear projectors started broadcasting Jake's motivational speech directly into their brains. The effect was immediate and hilarious. "What is happening to my fleet?" General Vexthul screamed from the communications channel. "You're getting motivated," Jake said cheerfully. "How does it feel?" "It feels like I should be working harder to achieve my goals," Vexthul admitted, his voice filled with confusion and what sounded suspiciously like inspiration. Elena was studying her scanners with growing excitement. "Jake, I'm detecting something interesting. The Zephyrians appear to have evolved in a low-stress environment. Their fear projectors work because they've never encountered a species that treats fear as a challenge rather than a deterrent. So they're basically bullies who've never met anyone who fought back." "That's actually a surprisingly accurate analysis," Elena said. Meanwhile, Ravi was having the time of his life. "Captain, I'm reading massive confusion in their fleet patterns. It looks like they're trying to retreat, but they can't stop listening to your speech about achieving excellence through determination." "Torres, take us closer to their flagship," Jake ordered. "I want to have a proper conversation with General Vexthul." "Sir, that's going to put us well within range of their conventional weapons," Torres warned. "Their conventional weapons are the least of our problems," Jake said. "The real challenge is going to be explaining to Command why we started a galactic war with a motivational speech." As the Resilience approached the Zephyrian flagship, Jake opened a direct communication channel. "General Vexthul, this is Captain Morrison. I'd like to discuss terms for your surrender." "Surrender?" Vexthul roared, though his voice still carried that odd note of inspiration. "The Zephyrian Empire does not surrender. We are the masters of fear. We are the bringers of terror. We are, actually. That speech about perseverance was quite moving. Do you have any more motivational content?" Elena covered her microphone and whispered to Jake, "I think we broke him." "General," Jake said patiently, "you've been using fear as a weapon for so long you've forgotten that there are other emotions. Fear is just one tool in the toolbox. What you're feeling now is determination, mixed with a healthy dose of confused self-reflection." "But fear is our strength," Vexthul protested. "It's what makes us powerful." "Fear is what makes you weak," Jake corrected. "You've become so dependent on it that you can't function when it doesn't work. That's not strength, that's a disability." Ravi looked up from his console with barely contained glee. "Captain, I'm reading massive system failures across their fleet. It looks like their fear projectors are overloading because they're trying to process human determination, and it's not computing." "What happens when they overload?" Jake asked. "Well, theoretically, they should shut down completely," Elena said. "But there's also a chance they could explode." "Explode?" Vexthul's voice came through the communication system with a note of panic. "Not explode, Jake said reassuringly. "More like catastrophically malfunction. You'll probably survive, but your fear projectors will be scrap metal." "But without our fear projectors, we're just ordinary soldiers," Vexthul said, his voice small and confused. "Welcome to the club," Jake said. "Now, about that surrender." What followed was the most surreal military negotiation in galactic history. The Zephyrian Empire, having had their primary weapon system turned into a motivational broadcasting network, found themselves in the unprecedented position of having to actually talk to their enemies instead of just scaring them into submission. "This is highly irregular," Vexthul kept saying, though he seemed unable to stop listening to Jake's speech about turning challenges into opportunities. "Everything's irregular until it becomes regular," Jake replied. "That's how progress works." Elena was recording everything for what she was already planning to title "The Day We Accidentally Conquered the Galaxy with Positive Thinking." The final battle, if it could be called that, was less a military engagement and more a cosmic therapy session with explosions. The Zephyrian fleet, now thoroughly confused by their own weaponry broadcasting human motivational content, had devolved into what could only be described as an existential crisis with laser beams. "Captain," Elena reported, barely able to contain her laughter, "I'm detecting several Zephyrian ships attempting to surrender to themselves." "How does one surrender to oneself?" Jake asked, genuinely curious. "Apparently by broadcasting self-help mantras while firing warning shots at their own fleet," Ravi said, his console showing the chaotic patterns of the enemy formation. "It's actually quite artistic if you ignore the massive tactical implications." General Vex Thul's face appeared on the main screen, his expression cycling through what appeared to be the 5 stages of grief at roughly 30-second intervals. "Human Morrison, what have you done to my empire?" "I gave you a pep talk," Jake said. "How's that working out for you?" "My subordinates are requesting performance reviews," Vex Thul said, his voice hollow. "Commander Zex Newell just asked me about career development opportunities. Admiral Vorth submitted a formal proposal for improving workplace morale." Elena leaned forward. "And how do you feel about that?" Confused, Vex Thul admitted, "But also oddly motivated to be a better leader?" "That's the human spirit," Jake said proudly. "We don't just fight our enemies, we accidentally inspire them to become better versions of themselves." From the Coalition channel, Commander Throx's voice came through with a mixture of awe and terror. "Captain Morrison, you've somehow convinced the most feared military force in the galaxy to engage in organizational self-improvement. This is either the most brilliant tactical maneuver in history or the most dangerous psychological warfare I've ever witnessed." "Why can't it be both?" Jake asked. Ravi looked up from his console with excitement. "Captain, I'm reading something interesting. The Zephyrian fear projectors have completely reversed polarity. Instead of broadcasting fear, they're now transmitting what I can only describe as aggressive optimism." "Aggressive optimism?" "They're making everyone in the sector feel like they can accomplish anything if they just put their minds to it," Elena explained. "The Coalition forces are reporting unprecedented levels of motivation and team spirit." "That's actually kind of beautiful," Jake said. "It's also completely destabilizing the balance of power in this entire sector," Throx pointed out. "What happens when everyone becomes too optimistic to maintain proper military discipline?" "They probably work together to solve their problems instead of fighting about them," Jake suggested. "That's horrifying," Throx said. "That's humanity," Elena corrected. The climax came when General Vex Thul, apparently having listened to Jake's motivational speech one too many times, made an announcement that would be remembered in galactic history textbooks for centuries. "Citizens of the Zephyrian Empire." He broadcast on all frequencies, "I have realized that our conquest of fear has made us slaves to fear. We have become what we sought to dominate. Therefore, I am officially declaring a moratorium on galactic conquest while we engage in empire-wide self-reflection and personal growth." Jake blinked. Did he just cancel the war for therapy? Elena finished. Yes, he did. "Furthermore," Vex Thul continued, "I am establishing the Zephyrian Department of Motivational Outreach, dedicated to helping other species achieve their full potential through positive encouragement rather than psychological manipulation." Ravi was frantically taking notes. "Captain, this is unprecedented. An entire military empire is restructuring itself based on a single human motivational speech." "Should I be worried about that?" Jake asked. "Probably," Elena said. "But it's also kind of amazing." The battle, such as it was, ended with the Zephyrian fleet forming a perfect circle around the Resilience while broadcasting synchronized affirmations of self-worth and personal achievement. The Coalition forces, still maintaining their strategic positions, several light hours away, watched in stunned silence as their greatest enemies transformed into the galaxy's most aggressively supportive life coaches. "Captain Morrison, Vexthal said, his image on the screen now showing what appeared to be genuine happiness. I would like to formally request that Earth consider establishing a cultural exchange program with the Zephyrian Empire. We have much to learn from your species' approach to conflict resolution. You mean accidentally turning your enemies into motivational speakers? Jake asked. It's more effective than anything we've tried in 3 centuries of conquest, Vexthal admitted. Commander Throx's voice came through the communication system, filled with a mixture of admiration and existential dread. Captain, you've achieved something that no military strategist in galactic history has ever accomplished. You've ended a war by making the enemy too inspired to fight. Is that good or bad? Jake asked. I honestly don't know, Throxex replied. But it's definitely human. 6 months later, Captain Jake Morrison found himself in the surreal position of being the galaxy's most reluctant celebrity. The Resilience Incident, as it had become known in diplomatic circles, had fundamentally altered the balance of power in the local sector, and Jake was still trying to figure out how he felt about that. Captain Dr. Elena Vasquez said, entering his quarters with a datapad and what appeared to be a barely contained smirk, that you're not going to believe the latest reports from the Zephyrian Empire. Jake looked up from his coffee, which now bore the title Galaxy's most accidentally effective diplomat courtesy of a gift from the Coalition. Please tell me they haven't conquered anyone with positive thinking. Worse, Elena said, settling into a chair. They've established the Galaxy's first Department of Interspecies Emotional Wellness. General Vexthal has been appointed as the Galactic Commissioner of Motivational Outreach. Of course he has, Jake muttered. What does that even mean? It means he's been traveling from system to system, helping resolve conflicts through what he calls aggressive encouragement, Elena explained. Last week, Nies, he mediated a trade dispute between the Andromedans and the Tau Sechans by convincing both sides that they were capable of achieving unprecedented levels of commercial cooperation. And did they? They signed the most comprehensive trade agreement in galactic history, Elena said. The Andromedans are calling it the Vexthal Accords. Jake rubbed his temples. So I accidentally turned the galaxy's most feared military leader into a motivational speaker, and now he's solving interstellar conflicts with pep talks. Pretty much, Elena confirmed, although he prefers the term inspirational warfare. Tech specialist Ravi Singh chose that moment to burst through the door, his face lit up with excitement. Captain, you have to see this. The Zephyrian Empire just released their new military doctrine. It's called Conquest Through Encouragement. I'm afraid to ask, Jake said. Instead of fear projectors, they're developing motivation amplifiers, Ravi continued enthusiastically. They're planning to help other species achieve their full potential by broadcasting targeted inspirational content directly to their neural networks. Elena blinked. So they're weaponizing self-help. It's brilliant, Ravi said. Completely ethically questionable, but brilliant. Jake's communicator chimed with an incoming message from command. He opened it to find a video message from Admiral Chen, whose expression suggested she was still processing the implications of what her crews had accomplished. Captain Morrison, she said, I've just received a formal request from the Galactic Council to establish Earth as the official mediator for interspecies conflicts. Apparently, our unique approach to conflict resolution has been deemed refreshingly effective. What does that mean for us? Jake asked. It means, Admiral Chen continued, that Earth has been invited to join the Galactic Defense Coalition as the Department of Unconventional Solutions. Congratulations, Captain. You've accidentally made humanity the galaxy's official problem solvers. Jake looked around his quarters, taking in the various commendations and gifts from species he'd never even heard of 6 months ago. Elena, when we left Earth, our mission was to handle minor trade disputes and provide routine peacekeeping support. That's correct, Elena said. And now we're apparently the galaxy's unofficial therapists. Also correct. How did that happen? You gave a motivational speech to a genocidal empire and accidentally convinced them to become life coaches, Elena said matter-of-factly. Right. Jake sipped his coffee thoughtfully. You know what? I can live with that. Commander Throx's voice came through the communication system, interrupting his contemplation. Captain Morrison, we're receiving a distress call from the Rigel system. Apparently, 2 species are engaged in what they're calling a politeness war. A politeness war? Jake asked. Each side is trying to out-courtesy the other, Throx explained, his voice carrying a note of barely contained bewilderment. They're deadlocked because neither side wants to be rude enough to accept the other's surrender. Elena started laughing. Only humans would create a galaxy where the biggest military crisis is people being too polite to each other. Torres, Jake called to his communications officer, set course for the Rigel system. Best possible speed. Sir, Torres replied, should I prepare the usual diplomatic protocols? Jake considered this. Torres, prepare the ultimate diplomatic protocol, which is put together a playlist of Earth's greatest motivational music, brew a fresh pot of coffee, and get ready to solve problems we never knew existed. As the Resilience changed course toward their next impossible mission, Jake reflected on the strange turn his life had taken. 6 months ago, he'd been a routine peacekeeping officer with a decent service record and a talent for making difficult negotiations slightly less difficult. Now, he was apparently the galaxy's go-to expert on turning military conflicts into group therapy sessions. Captain, Elena said, watching the stars shift as they entered hyperspace. Do you ever wonder if we're changing the galaxy too much? Jake thought about it for a moment. Elena, 6 months ago, the most feared military force in the galaxy was conquering civilizations through psychological warfare. Now they're traveling the galaxy helping people achieve their dreams. If that's change, I'm okay with it. Even if it means we're responsible for galactic peace through aggressive positivity? Especially then, Jake said, settling back into his chair. Besides, someone has to keep an eye on Vex Thul. The man's enthusiasm is inspiring, but he still needs supervision. The Resilience streaked through hyperspace toward their next crisis, carrying with it the most unlikely peacekeeping force in galactic history. A crew of humans who had accidentally conquered the galaxy with nothing more than determination, caffeine, and the radical idea that most problems could be solved by actually talking to each other. And in the depths of space, former General Vex Thul was broadcasting his latest motivational message to a grateful galaxy. Remember, citizens of the cosmos, every challenge is just an opportunity wearing a disguise. This has been your Galactic Commissioner of Motivational Outreach, reminding you that you're all capable of achieving greatness. Have a wonderful day, and keep reaching for the stars. The galaxy had never been more confused, more inspired, or more at peace. And Jake Morrison was perfectly fine with that.